The category is What the Trans, darling?
Hello, and a very time zone appropriate salutation to you. Happy queer quarantine, and welcome to What the Trans.
What the Trans.
Yes, indeedy, What the Trans. We are still here, powering through. As we so often do, we're just kind of sitting at home, getting on with all the lockdown stuff, as I'm sure many of you are. How are you getting on with it, Michelle?
I'm doing better because our boiler broke like 3 days into lockdown.
Those two sentences don't seem to work together. Oh, I'm doing better because our boiler broke. What?
Well, there is a clarification coming as we put in like a ticket with our landlord agency thing on how to report things, thinking, well, we'll put the ticket in now and maybe once lockdown is done, they can get someone the second it's safe to do so. But then they sent a man over. An actual man to like fit a whole new boiler, because it turns out those people are indeed key workers, and when you're living with someone who is very shortly going to be in the NHS dealing with COVID, it turns out you kind of want hot showers to avoid an outbreak potentially spreading in your block.
Yes, indeed.
Which is smart. So I guess this is a PSA. If your boiler's broken, don't feel weird about putting a ticket in to try and get that shit fixed, because it turns out that kind of thing is very much a key worker thing, and anything that can be done to make it so you don't run out the house just begging randoms for hot water is probably a good thing for the national health. So there you go.
That's a fair point, actually, yes. Taken together, on balance, it's... Yeah, fair enough. Well, good. Glad you can now enjoy the joys of hot water.
I can't smell myself right now. And that is kind of how I like it to be.
Oh, dude, don't tell me that.
I don't want to smell me either.
Then, yeah. I just kind of faffing about this week, really. Obviously still trying to put through for job stuff, which has taken on some slightly interesting and Kafkaesque overtones. But there was a tweet I saw that, well, it was in a BuzzFeed article, which is where I saw it, and it kind of exemplified it, which is like, I'm really sick of this lovely, wholesome, whole grain version of my life that I'm living at the moment. Oh, what is it? Another delicious home-cooked meal, is it? Oh, and afterwards a lovely walk in the sunshine. Fuck's sake. Like, yeah. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Like, I baked bread earlier today, and my housemate, who is also a key worker, on her way home, passes by a Chinese supermarket. Now, there are never any other customers in this Chinese supermarket, because actually it turns out a lot of British people are quite racist. So we've been doing really well eating all this delicious Chinese food recently, including those little weird fluffy rice ball things, which then was like, oh, well, we could make this and that and whatever. So the half hour just before we did the podcast, I've been looking at taro recipes. So yeah, check me out. I'm living my best quarantine life. I am almost certainly putting on so much weight. But hey, that's cool, because some of it goes to my boobs. So,
And if you would like to support Ashleigh's
boobs.
Yeah, boobs enlargement. Please send all of your recipes for various concoctions that you can get from Chinese supermarkets to @WhatTheTrans on Twitter. Help Ashleigh get bigger boobs by supporting Chinese businesses. I think that is a hashtag that has to take off.
There are so many elements to that, and I think what a fine example of a globalized, well-integrated society. Or something, I don't know. Anyway, yes, the strange times of COVID-19 and the related measures to it continues to rumble on, and that's the flavour of our news this week. And it's so the segment, obviously terrible news, but it's not really news this time, I suppose, so much as, well, actually, here's some potentially important information about a couple of things that LGBT people, and particularly trans people, might be dealing with in increased numbers because we are all locked down. So, content warning, really, for the first part of this episode is going to discuss domestic abuse. And afterwards, we're going to be talking about what measures the gender identity clinics currently have in place, if any, to support their patients who obviously have to stay at home because of the lockdown. So, as I said, we're starting off with a different kind of terrible news this week. The lockdown situation in the UK and around the world is having some particularly nasty knock-on effects when it comes to people living with, well, various kinds of abusive partners or family members and other people that you might be stuck in the house with. Obviously, with so many services in this particular area running on the skeleton staff as it is, and other government services essentially on pause, it might be easy to believe that if you are stuck in an abusive situation, there is nothing you can do to help yourself. But this is not true. We are here to tell you. So to get some information on what to do if you yourself are in danger, Michelle earlier on talked to Diana James, an academic and a worker in domestic abuse refuges. And, well, let's play the tape.
Hey Diana, thank you so much for joining us on the show once again. Hope you are staying safe in these less than ideal conditions. So you work in domestic abuse and you work for refuges in and around all over the place. What would you want to say to people who believe that they are in trouble?
If they feel that they're in possibly going to be harm or violence, physical violence, that they're going to be hit or hurt, or that they believe they're in any kind of danger at all, you must phone 999. I know that people might feel reluctant to do that. It's easy to downplay what you've been living with for some time, as you've got your own ways of dealing with it, of making the situation sort of peter out, go away, calming things down. But if you feel that you're in danger, you must phone 999. I realise that you're going to think, well, with everything that's going on, the police are going to be so busy, they're not going to want to deal with me. That's not true. They want you to phone. If you believe that you're in any danger at all, you believe that you're in danger at all. Doesn't have to have happened, but you believe that to be coming true. Please phone them. Phone 999, and the police will come, and they will take you away from that situation, and they will keep you safe. It doesn't matter what your sexuality, what your gender is, where you are on your trans, and where you are as far as being trans is concerned. They have no issues around that at all. They will take you to somewhere safe, and then they will arrange for somewhere for you to stay with the local council, who will find you emergency accommodation. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a lovely flat somewhere or anything like that, but it will be somewhere safe, and they will keep you safe, and you'll have food, warmth, and a safe place to be.
So if somebody is in a situation where they believe they are in danger, I mean, it's quite likely at times like this where it may take a few attempts to get through to someone. Would you say that, like, people should just keep going and keep standing their ground as much as they can until they get something out of them?
Yes, absolutely. When you do phone the police, if you feel you're in danger and that's your first port of call, is 999. When you phone them, as I say, please don't downplay your fear, especially if, for instance, someone's tried to control you by putting their hand to your throat. That is a big danger signal. What you need to do then is immediately phone 999 and tell them that. Tell them that you feel in danger, and they have a duty and a care responsibility to come and get you and keep you safe. And they want to do this. They would much, much prefer to deal with it before you're hurt than to try and deal with it afterwards. So please do call them, and they will keep you safe. And I realise that people with what's going on at the moment may feel reluctant, but please don't. Please do call them. They do want you to call.
Okay, and what about friends and family members of people who may be in trouble? Is there anything that they can do to help out if things are getting dangerous for people that they know and love?
What they can do is they can inform the police themselves if they have that belief that this is happening. The difficulty is for the police to get like a second-hand report of what's going on, but it's better that they know something is happening and you feel that that person is in harm's way, because that person may not be able to contact the police. They may not have a mobile phone, or it may have been taken away, or the telephone may have been removed, so that they have no way of contacting the police or anyone else. If they do feel that this is happening, then please contact the police. If you feel that person's in danger, then please call 999. If you're suspicious that they're being domestically abused in any other way, there is 101, but that is such a long wait at the moment that if you think that someone is actually in danger, that you're thinking of calling the police, probably 999 is going to be your best bet.
So obviously over the last few years there has been a lot of various discourse around trans people being allowed into certain refuges. Would you be able to speak to the reality of that? Like, would a refuge at this point be willing to take a trans person in?
Absolutely. The refuges that I've worked with and the refuges that work with Women's Aid take transgender people into those refuges. Transgender women go into women's refuges. Transgender men go into male refuges. There is no issues around that. I know that there's also sort of reports about, for instance, there's always danger to women from transgender women going into refuge. Well, over the last 15 years or so, there's not been a single report of any issues or trouble within a refuge concerning a trans person. And trans people have been going into refuge for at least that long, and I suspect a lot longer, because that trans person may not have come out within the refuge system. And we know that this has happened. So trans people are welcome. I have seen trans people in both male and female refuges, and they are cared for and treated properly. There is no danger from the staff or from other members of domestic abused people living in refuge. There are policies in place that will protect you. And if anybody says anything bad, you just need to report that to staff and staff will deal with it. The equal opportunities policies within refuge are very strictly adhered to, and you will be safe there. As far as non-binary people are concerned within refuge, sadly, refuges are binary places. So you're going to have to make a choice as to which one you feel most comfortable within, whether that be a male refuge or a female refuge.
Yeah, it's not ideal for non-binary people right now, but that may have to be a fight that comes later when it comes to being in lockdown these days. It may just have to be about accepting the best place available.
Yeah, it is going to be a situation that would have to be resolved later. It's not something, obviously, that's going to be happening at the moment. And the chances are it's going to be a little time after this because of all the funding and money and that sort of thing that refuge needs. If they're going to do non-binary, it's going to be difficult to know how that's going to be worked. This is going to be a complicated discussion that needs non-binary input into it. It cannot be decided for non-binary people. Non-binary people must be in the decision-making process.
All right, Diana, thank you very much for talking to me. Stay safe, you hear?
I'm going to. And can everybody out there please stay safe? And if you feel that you're in any danger at all, please call the police. I know we have had negative stuff with the police in the past, and to an extent, some of that still goes on. But as far as domestic abuse is concerned, they're there for you.
Now, obviously there are many kinds of abuse, and even if you do not believe that you are in physical danger, but are nonetheless still stuck in an abusive situation, here is what will hopefully be some useful advice. You could perhaps arrange a safe word or emoji, essentially to tell a friend a very quick code that means that you are in danger, and that they need to contact the police on your behalf. That's something that you'd need to work out ahead of time. Some other advice is to consider the layout of your home. Perhaps try and avoid areas of your home where you could easily be cornered, or avoid rooms that have items in them that could be used against you, for example, the kitchen. And perhaps make a plan to head to a safe room with a lockable door that has some way of getting in touch with the police, or, again, a way for you to contact somebody else, to a friend who can do that for you. There are contact details for your local council's domestic abuse services. Like Diana just said, while much of the local council services have been suspended, they will still have people covering this particular issue from home. So seek them out, seek out the numbers and keep it in a safe place so you have it if you need it. We're going to include as many of these numbers as we can on the reference sheet linked in the description, or at least have some way for you to find these numbers yourselves. Now, in regards to emotional, psychological and digital forms of abuse, reach out and tell your friends and family what is happening. Even if you only suspect that you are a victim, abuse can take many forms, especially in non-physically violent ways. So again, you can check the reference sheet for phone lines you can contact to talk through your situation with people who might have experience of this area and can offer some useful advice on how to respond or perhaps otherwise protect yourself. Which leads me neatly to the next bit of advice. Again, the links in our reference sheet, this will always be linked to in the description and will include links to a variety of advice that's been put out by Safe Lives, Women's Aid and Gallup. Now for LGBT-specific advice, contact Gallup. Gallup are an LGBT anti-domestic violence charity that, according to a statement released on their website, are still accepting referrals for all of our services. They go on to say that as our service capacity is reduced, this might mean that we might be slower to respond to some requests and possibly unable to meet all needs. We hope you will appreciate that we are doing our best to continue to provide vital services to LGBT plus victims and survivors, so do keep trying to contact them if at first they do not respond. They will get to you. So the information and advice I've just given you has come from a variety of sources, all of which are linked in the description, but as Diana said, pretty much every refuge, domestic violence service and charity in the UK is trans inclusive. Your identity will be respected, and as much as the police are problematic, if you are in physical danger, they have to be your first port of call, as currently asking friends or family to help you escape could risk putting themselves in danger of contracting the virus or putting them at risk at being in trouble with the police for breaking the lockdown. Finally, to friends or family who are worried about a loved one, please be aware, or try and be aware and try and read through the links, some of which are in the description, to become familiar with the science and familiar with the safest ways that you can try and help them. According to the government, the only plan to deal with this situation is by asking people to draw a handprint on a window, and clearly this is not going to be something that's going to actually help. So it's up to us now to try and help people stuck in dangerous situations as much as we can.
Yeah, I think the only hot take I have to add to that is stay in touch with everyone in your circle, especially now. I know people are doing this anyway, but I think it's very important to check in, even if you suspect, and only suspect, based on a bad feeling that something is going on. That checking in doesn't have to be, hey, are you being abused right now? It can take many forms, just by, checking in, asking if they're okay, seeing if they want to play a game online, or seeing if they want to, watch a specific TV show with you on Zoom or something. Just check in with your circle. Make sure that you are known to people and that they can come to you if something is going on. Yeah, let's move on to the other half of this particularly fun, terrible news segment.
It's also joyful.
And thankfully, yeah, it really is. And thankfully to the final bit of terrible news is that gender identity services in the NHS around the UK are on hold in most ways, but to the individual clinics. Obviously, right now there are no functioning clinics in Wales, but for Scotland, England and Northern Ireland, here is the breakdown on what all of the clinics are going to do or are not doing. So starting off in Northern Ireland, they only have one clinic, the Brackenburn Gender Identity Clinic in Belfast, and that does not appear to have put out any information on what services they are still offering during the pandemic. We have reached out to them to find out a bit more, but at time of recording, we have not heard anything back, which is understandable considering that lockdown is having very, very strange and understandable effects on communication in general. But as soon as we hear back from them, which I am very sure we will let you know with what they say. We will let you know what they have said to us. So moving on to Scotland, the Sandyford Clinic for Adults and Young People in Glasgow has put out the following guidance. From Monday the 23rd of March, all gender identity service appointments are cancelled. Due to staff absence, we are currently unable to answer phone calls. Please leave a voicemail and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Our waiting list is open and accepting new referrals. Please be aware that in light of COVID-19, we are unable to advise what the current wait will be. It is anticipated that waiting times will be significant due to the pressure on NHS services at this time. We are currently working to provide a listening ear support service to clients and will update this page when this becomes available. Now, we will put links in the description for how you can get in touch with them if you are a current patient. Also, I should probably put in here that is not written down, that I should have written down but didn't. Waiting times for this particular service were already through the roof as it was, so expect your waiting times to be extended significantly. Now, the Lothian Sexual Health Clinic in Edinburgh has suspended all face-to-face appointments, but is offering to carry out appointments over the phone or online going forward. They have also said that if you have any questions or inquiries that cannot wait till lockdown is over, please call them on 0131 536 1070, and we will provide all the information for them in the description, including that phone number, so don't feel like you have to remember it. It is written down on a page in a place, and it is down below the podcast in the description. The Highland Sexual Health Clinic, operating out of Inverness, has severely reduced their services in other areas, but we were unable to find information on the gender services specifically at the time of recording. We have reached out to them and will update you as and when they get back to us. The Grampian Gender Identity Clinic, operating out of Aberdeen, also doesn't appear to have any website and also hasn't really put any other information, so we weren't able to even try and get in contact with them. But if you are a service user and have received any information on them, please let us know via our website, whatthetrans.com, or at whatthetrans on Twitter, and the second we hear anything from anyone, we will put it out there in whatever way we can. So moving to England, the Charing Cross Gender Identity Services in London have suspended all face-to-face appointments and have put out the following statement on their website. Unfortunately, we will not be able to sign off for hormones or refer patients for surgery over the phone. These appointment types will be rescheduled as a priority as soon as face-to-face appointments resume. If you wish to cancel your upcoming appointment, you will not be penalised and you will be rescheduled as soon as normal clinical activities resume. Now, quite why you need a face-to-face appointment to get your hormones sorted is anyone's guess. Maybe it's a blood pressure thing or a blood test thing. I don't know for sure, but I know that those services you can still get on the NHS, or you can find and buy a blood pressure machine online on Amazon or Argos or anywhere else that happens to still be delivering. But regardless, we will include contact information for Charing Cross in the description so you can call them up and find out yourself about your specific care. Also worth noting is that they recently put out guidance for GPs on how to support their transgender patients during this, and one piece of advice also worth noting is that they recently put out guidance for GPs on how to support their transgender patients during this, and one piece of advice caused significant alarm when they said that physically, if hormone supplies are disrupted, that the physical danger is low. To many... Oh, loud car. First car in ages that's driven past my place. To many, this read as hormones for trans people are not a big issue. This take, however, is inaccurate. The guidance was written in regards to physical dangers, as going without hormones for a while would probably not cause significant physical health problems, and we double-checked this with a few people, some of them doctors, to confirm this. However, the guidance does make no allowances for the psychological effects of hormones being stopped, which is another thing entirely. As yet, we haven't seen any evidence of hormone supplies being affected by the pandemic any more than they were before, but if you are having trouble filling your prescriptions, please let us know. And if your supply is stopped, we will have links in the description on ways to get you through and support you during that time. But it should be said that physically your body is unlikely to encounter any medical problems as a result of changing hormones. But psychologically, it's a different matter. So please check the links in the description to find support if this happens to you. Now, when it comes to the Tavistock in London, or the GIDS Young Persons Gender Identity Clinic, as they are sometimes known, they have suspended all face-to-face appointments as well, but are seeking to offer telephone and online appointments instead. We have included contact information in the description where you can check with them if you or one of your children is in their service. According to their website, people will be able to answer the phone, so get in touch. Now, the Porterbrook Clinic in Sheffield is offering a reduced service, but will be sorting out appointments over the phone. They will also be unable to sign off on hormone prescriptions and surgeries remotely or over the phone, but have said they will reschedule those appointments as a priority once it is safe to resume face-to-face appointments. And with the rest of the GICs in England, the Newsham Centre in Leeds, the Northern Region Gender Dysphoria Service in Newcastle, the West of England Specialist Gender Identity Service in Devon, and the Gender Identity Clinics in Northampton and Nottingham have also reduced their services in the same way as Sheffield and London, and we provide links in the description on how you can get in touch with them. The important thing to remember is that your trans healthcare is still important. I would be bashing the table with my fist if it wouldn't fuck with the microphone. Do not accept that your healthcare is no longer a priority due to the pandemic. Do not be afraid to call your clinic and demand information and demand that your appointments are on schedule. This will not be disrupting COVID-19 responses. They have these people sitting at home, waiting by the phone to deal with your phone calls. That is their job during this, so make them work for their money. Obviously, if you are awaiting hormones or surgery, chances are these things will be delayed for the foreseeable, but do not let yourself be forgotten. We will stay on this throughout and have reached out to all the clinics mentioned, and if we hear anything from them, we will put it out on our Twitter, on our website, or on the next episode of the pod, whichever comes first. If you experience any issues, please get in touch with us and let us know so we can put the information out there for the community. I really wanted to get emphatic with that and bash the desk, but that is unfortunately something we cannot do in our particular recording setups, but yeah.
I mean, we can, it just doesn't sound very good. So, and no, I'm not going to demonstrate. For some reason, I was thinking of when, you know, in the miniseries Chernobyl, and they start banging the desk, like, yes, yes, yes. But it's not that. It's an emphatic banging, like, God damn it, thud, you know. But, this is not an easy thing to deal with, particularly if you are in that system. There's so much uncertainty within the UK GIC system as it is. You know, as we've mentioned before, there's a lot of, I've forgotten the word, but everybody's doing things slightly differently. Some people have appointments after 3 months or 6 months or whatever. You know, and there's no there's no consistency to it. So,
yeah, when I was diving into this week, I found myself at various points being like, okay, this segment could be 4 hours long.
Yes. And it nearly was.
Yeah, it really was almost 4 hours long. But yeah, do get in touch with your specific clinic and do not be afraid of bothering them, because you will not be affecting the NHS's deal with COVID. These are all people that you'll be contacting who they're not going to be in a Nightingale. They're not going to be there. No one's going to die because you called them. That's the message.
So, that segment, that big block of news was not the best, maybe a little bit depressing, so we thought we'd do something a little bit more fun for this week's meat. And obviously, most of the world, and definitely the UK, is still very much on lockdown, and lots of people are turning to all sorts of different ways of passing the time. Obviously, lots of people are doing baking and getting into crochet and all sorts of lovely homely stuff like that, but normal people are just playing shitloads of video games, which is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and we want to talk about games you can play that have people like you in it, because we're all playing video games a lot more. I know I am. And it would be nice if, whilst we're here at home playing lots of games and obviously buying new games to try and fill up our long and empty lockdown days, it would be nice to play some games that have people like you in it. People who are trans, people who are non-binary, people who are intersex, and people who are otherwise gender non-conforming in some way, somehow. So, to talk about this, we have brought in our brand new producer and avid gamer, Steam Curator, and all-round knowledgeable human on video game things, Joe Ross-Barrett.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Joe. Welcome aboard. Yes, you get to see how the sausage is made today, so...
and make it better.
And make it better. Whip us into
shape. Me and
shape.
Ashleigh are not the most organised people in the world, but we do think we make up for it with charm, wit and snark. So
I'm definitely with
I apologise for all of that.
So, I mean, normally, you know, we have a guest on. We're like, oh, so tell us a little bit about yourself. But I feel like we've just given many of the salient details. But so you're a Steam Curator. What does that mean?
It means that I put up reviews of different games that are available on Steam in 200 characters or less. My particular focus is on inclusion, so it's a lot of different angles to try and cram into that space. I focus mostly on what's actually there, so if there's a playable person of colour, I'll mention that. I'm white, so I'm not going to try and judge the quality of that representation, but generally if it defaults to a plain white avatar and no option to change it, that's it's all too common in games. And one of my other big angles, which is the one we're going to be focusing on today, is trying to cover gender identity in games. So I tend to put whether they have options for you to select your pronouns or your gender identity, that traditional Pokemon, are you a boy or are you a girl? And I just sit there going, I love this series, but I wish there was a non-binary option.
See, that was my very, very particular and not the most non-binary inclusive thing when I was a teenager in the late 90s, was very much in the first Pokemon where it was like, you're a boy now, and I'm like,
not again.
No,
not again.
I just stopped that. Yeah. No, that's fair. And I think, although I would say that just the fact that there is a gender selector for a lot of games, and certainly for a number of games as I was growing up, although by no means all of them, does allow you to play as a different gender identity. Now, granted, for non-binary people, it kind of sucks because it's just not there. However, I know a lot of trans women and I know a lot of gamers, and if you're wondering what that Venn diagram looks like, it's a circle. And all of whom have said that when, you know, as a nipper, as a young egg, playing a video game and playing as a female character was like, oh, yeah, look, I just chose a female character as a joke. Yeah, ha 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 ha, God, I'm such a card. Yeah. Kind of thing. Which, honestly, it's odd how much that sort of thing can help. So, yeah, I do want to see more games where there's, like, actual non-binary representation, so the non-binary humans of now, who are confused and scared and isolated and turning to video games, can still see themselves represented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a good point to be made on a certain privilege that quote-unquote binary trans people may have in the video game scape, because when I was a young one back in the day, there was a game called Ultima Online, which I did not understand then, and I understand even less of now, but that was probably my first quote-unquote cross-dressing experience, where I would secretly have a female character.
Yeah.
And I would go online and just mess around dressing the character up in all sorts of fancy garb and just be like, this is alleviating something in me. Don't know what this means. But then I had that experience, and non-binary people on the whole don't appear to have had that same experience.
Yeah, for me personally, I had similar but not quite the same experiences, where the first time I started going by Joe, which is a shorter version of the name I was given at birth, it was in Pokemon games that forced me to play as a boy. Because I looked at my birth name and I looked at the avatar and I went, well, this clearly doesn't fit, because, you know, at the time I had a very binary view of gender. And so I shortened it, and then I thought, oh, this is quite nice, actually. Won't think about that too hard.
Yeah. Don't scratch the itch. Don't scratch the itch. Yeah.
And then when I started playing tabletop role-playing games, where you have a lot more character agency, and you get to actually interact with the world rather than the silent protagonists of Pokemon, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a character, and they're going to be a pirate, and he's going to be an ex-socialite, and he, is assigned female at birth, but didn't want to be put into an arranged marriage, and has disguised himself as a cabin boy and run away to sea.
Nice.
And this definitely isn't me using a tabletop role-playing game as a proxy to figure out my gender stuff. Nope, what are you talking about?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be so many of our listeners, particularly of our listeners specifically, who just listen to you say that while nodding their heads as well. And you're still doing it now. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There are so many people that I know who've said that exact same thing, that kind of experience of being able to play around with it a little bit more. About tabletop role-play games specifically, I only got to TTRPGs much, much later than everybody else. I was already in my late 20s by the time I said, yeah, I'll give a TTRPG a go. Sounds fun, kind of thing. And now I'm all over it.
Is that tabletop role-playing game?
TTRPG, yeah. So, but the number of people I know in Manchester who also, I'm going to make that Venn diagram circle joke again, because it is most of the people that I know who have come out after because they've been doing tabletop gaming for a long, long time. And usually the, latent gender identity is one of the first things that they want to do with any given roleplay character. It's like, well, can I play as a girl? Yes. Then, all right, I'm in. I'm like, okay, and I'm not going to think too much about that either.
The thing I used to explain to people in role-playing games, computer ones. I never really did the tabletop thing until fairly recently. Shout out to Trans Gloucester for letting me in on their game. Having a wonderful time there. Really loving the D&D. But the thing that I used to say to people who would be like, why are you playing as a woman in this game? I'd always say like, oh, it's because you can get a trait, which means it's you can get a Black Widow trait, which means that you get more of an experience bonus if you kill men. So I basically had that as my cover story. Yeah. Even though in half the games I said that about, it isn't true.
Yeah, the only one I've encountered where that's true is Fallout, which was actually one of the first RPGs I played online. Anyway, so the point is, as we've probably indicated to you, we've got a certain amount of enthusiasm for videos game.
Because gender presentations are usually so binary in games, it's very much like, do you want the very assigned male at birth cis dude looking avatar, or do you want the very assigned female at birth cis lady looking avatar? The one example that I've seen of something properly giving it a go and trying to do real non-binary representation is Temtem, which is a Pokemon-like MMO. And it's, got glorious contrasts to the way that Pokemon does gender, with sort of male and female clothes being locked off depending on what you pick at the start of the game, that sort of thing. In Temtem, you can choose whether you have a flat or a curved chest. You can choose whether your little voice squeaks are higher or deeper. And you can choose to have they, she, or he pronouns. And all of the clothes are available regardless of what gender.
Good. And indeed, that reflects real life quite nicely, because actually, if you think about it, all clothes are gender neutral if you stop being a little bitch about it.
It took me quite a long time to figure that bit out. There was a Tumblr post that I saw that was like, how to look non-binary, and I was like, yes! Clicked on it, and it went, be non-binary. Wear clothes.
Boom.
They are your clothes, and therefore they are non-binary clothes. Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, it's true.
Pretty much.
And that inspired me to try skirts after a break of over a decade. So that was a great Tumblr post.
Nice.
Whoever's out there and made it.
To be honest, skirts are great for everyone. It's true. In the summer. They are just practical.
Yep, they were so much better when I was working a shop job and I was overheating.
So steering us back slightly to the interview, so, Joe, in your opinion then, how has trans and non-binary and intersex representation been in video games so far? Because I've heard of a couple of them, and I know of a few, but how predominant is it? And are there any particularly brilliant or indeed particularly terrible examples?
Well, I had a little look for proper data on this morning, and I managed to find a source called Counting Queerness in Games. Trends in LGBTQ digital game representation 1985 to 2005.
Snappy title.
Yeah, we can put a link to that at the show notes.
Indeed.
And it had quite a lot of data to go on, and I was like, hooray, this has been done for me, this is great. And the levels of representation, just in terms of the number of times that trans or non-binary or intersex people were in games at all, were very low. Just stunningly low. And they made a distinction between implicit and explicit representation, which I thought was quite interesting. So when they were queer coding somebody in a particular way,
I see.
That would be counted as implicit.
Whereas if something like, male character kissing his boyfriend or whatever is made explicit, I suppose.
Yeah, as opposed to explicit R-rated.
Yeah. Which, I'm sure there's some games like that as well, although most of...
And if you know any, please send them to @WhatTheTrans so I can play them, because those sound exactly like what
I was going to say is the type of R-rated games I tend to play. I'm not using the Xbox. It tends to be more of a bedroom thing. So I know there's been a few there's discourse around this because, of course there is, because the discourse is inescapable. So the paper that you've mentioned then, obviously I skimmed through some of the notes that you put up for it, and thank you for that. But there's a very interesting point about basically humanness, non-humanness, and, it kind of seems to be going beyond queer coding in a sense, because the people that you see most regularly who don't follow the same gender binary that maybe the human characters do, they are, alien or some kind of non-human entity. Is that part of the same pattern, do you think, in terms of queer coding?
Yeah, definitely. When I said, I'm going to be talking about non-binary representation in games, have you got any recommendations, to my friend, his first response was, you should have to do Metatan. from Undertale, who is a robot.
Yes.
Who is a very queer-coded robot.
Yes.
Delightfully non-binary, but, like, I wanted actual humans, and that made it much harder. And I was like, well, I'm surprised you didn't say Frisk. And he was like, oh yeah, Frisk is non-binary. Because it just wasn't as in-your-face queer, I guess.
Yeah.
And so people tend to project whatever gender identity they want onto their protagonist figure, even when that's a kind of non-binary person.
I think an interesting one to point out would be the first Metroid game on the
Yes.
Nintendo Entertainment System, which has gone down in legend because you play through the whole game. And at that point, I think pretty much every protagonist, or at least 99% of protagonists, were cis male. So players would go in assuming that this character, Samus Aran, we're playing as, is a male, and was even referred to he, him in the instruction booklet. I remember because I had that instruction booklet. But then at the end of the game, it's kind of... Well, no, it's not kind of. It's actually sexist where, you know, she removes her armor and you get to play through the game again in a bikini.
Oh, God.
But you discover that she's a woman, and at the time, people were just like, wow, what a twist! Who would have thought a woman being in a video game? My God!
That's quite something. I always had assumed that it was just like, you know, a helmet remove reveal. I didn't know there was a bikini involved.
I mean, in fairness, you're probably not going to wear like a full-on woolly jumper and corduroy pants when you're inside a giant mech suit. You know, it's going to get really sweaty in there.
No, but in reality, astronauts, like, there was a scene in Gravity where Sandra Bullock, finally escapes from the horrible catastrophe that's happening in space, and she gets into a safe place, and she takes off all of her stuff, and she's there just, like, in her pants floating around in space for a bit. And a lot of people just like, actually, astronauts have all sorts of pipes and tubes going in and out of their junk to deal with waste. So that's unrealistic. So I think if my biggest beef with the first Metroid game is they didn't depict that accurately.
Fair enough.
How did Samus Aran do a shit in all those hours of running around hunting down Metroids?
You have to lower the tone, don't you?
That is my job here. That is literally my job. You're the highbrow one. I'm the one who ruins it. That's why I'm here.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So, yeah. On the humanness point, the study that I mentioned earlier pointed out that most of the gender non-conforming, transgender, intersex, and non-binary characters were not human, and that non-humanness, non-whiteness, and non-cisgenderness seem to be conflated in the way that these characters are represented. It also noted that human characters were more likely to be player characters, whereas non-human characters were more likely to be enemies, and non-human characters were often represented with more implicit sexuality, suggesting that sexual difference was being offloaded into non-humanness in the medium. Which I think is pretty alarming, actually, because if the things that look like queer people and act like queer people are the things that you're supposed to go murder, that's really an interesting message.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, that translates to other mediums as well. I've seen that kind of thing happen. I think Anita Sarkeesian from Feminist Frequency made the point that in the Hunger Games films, gender nonconformity was seen as an extravagance in District 1, where all the rich people live. And that in itself is problematic because it sort of backs up the idea that being trans is an urban, metropolitan, very Western, capitalist thing, an extravagance that real people living in the shit in District 12 don't have the time to do. Men are men, women are women, and that's how things are. Whereas that's really not the case.
Yeah, in reality, everybody in District 12 is just there like, well, I wish I could present as my actual gender, but everything is trash and society would hate.
Yeah, basically that. They probably get those guys in the white stormtrooper things coming down on them, just like, you can't wear a skirt, dude.
We're making reference to so much popular cultural media stuff, and I'm having to wing it with this because I've seen one Hunger Games film and that's it. So I'm just like, yeah, District 12, definitely, absolutely. Moving on. I do think it is interesting that the kind of, the non-whiteness, the non-cisness is kind of being loaded into, if not necessarily enemy characters, then not player characters. Simply because I've been playing a game in space recently, but there don't seem seem to be any humans in it. It's No Man's Sky, essentially. And there's 4 different kinds of characters to be, and you can select between, a couple of different types of body type and whatever. And so nowhere at any point in the character selection screen is gender mentioned. But then the same goes for those NPCs as well. There's one race in particular where they all seem to refer to each other by they pronouns. There's no gender in this particular society. And it's interesting that, even in a game where they're just kind of NPCs there to occasionally shoot at you and trade with you, they're still kind of putting non-conformist concepts onto those NPCs. Wow, this got really deep really quickly, didn't it?
Actually, there's something similar in a visual novel that I once played. The Far Rings, a space opera visual novella, has an alien race that entirely uses they pronouns. And it's kind of nice in that it means that out of your 3 main characters, you've got a cis woman and a non-binary they-them alien and a cis man. But at the same time, yay, our representation is non-human once again. Because it's so unthinkable that you could have a non-binary, regular human character who's accepted in the society that we assume they're from, that it makes more sense to just lump it all into an external society that doesn't have a problem with it.
I mean, I find that very hard to imagine that kind of society could exist without assholes on Twitter going, but that's not how the English language works. They, them is about plural.
Chromosomes.
We should all be using thou.
Yeah, quite. Well, I learned everything I need to know about chromosomes and genetics from Year 9 biology, and that's the extent of my knowledge. Maureen, full-time mum. Yes, so lots of themes, essentially. So what has been one of your favourites recently then, Joe? What has had really good representation that you keep recommending to people?
There's a game called Saving You From Yourself by a developer called Taylor McHugh that you can get on itch.io for free. And it's very short, but it was really emotionally impactful on me. And it made me realise some of the barriers to medical care for trans women in a way that I just hadn't experienced the visceral horror of before, because that's not my lived experience. And you play as a gender psychiatrist, whichever of those it is. And basically, you're in an American-style healthcare system where everything costs a small fortune. And it is your job to make sure that people don't make a mistake and do something they'll regret, by which they mean transition. And as you play through it, you get dialogue options of like, okay, have you heard enough about this person, or do you want to get them to come back for another appointment? And between appointments, you see how they respond to the delay in their access to hormones. And it gets real dark. Do I need to put content warnings on describing that?
I think we can probably leave it there.
Like, the game itself has content warnings built in, so if you're not sure about it, you can always go check those out. Yeah, I think it's more useful for educating the cis than it is for providing a nice, happy, fun time for trans women.
Yeah, I played that game already. It kind of sucks. No, I mean, the actual game is probably great. I mean, I did it in real life.
I was going to say, it's like, that sounds like something that's a little bit close to home, And so this is something that it's got quite a frivolous example, isn't it? Which is basically games forcing you to do stuff that you actually do in real life. As part of a game mechanic, like, travel here and do this. And then in the end, EVE Online in particular, basically, which is just spreadsheets in space. And it's like, I don't want to pay money for this thing, which basically involves me doing a load of extra work for kind of no purpose. So yes, going through a game where you have to go through transition again, that just doesn't sound like much fun. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. One of the ones that I liked that wasn't is called Ace in Space.
I've heard of that. Yes, I've heard of one! Yes!
It is extremely cute. You play as a non-binary person of colour. You start off with one name, and then when you make your way out into space with a bunch of robots, they're like, so what do you want us to call you? And you decide to change your name to Envy. You go about your life being somebody with cancer who's trying to get treatment for that, and making friends with your new robot buddies, trying to figure out your purpose in the society that you're carving out as a sort of test run for creating a nice planet for the rest of humankind. And it's just good and wholesome. It's not like miserable. It's just kind of, oh hey, what are your pronouns? This. Okay, cool. Mine are these. Is the chill level of representation.
That does sound really cool. I now want to go and find that. And if you're thinking the same thing, person listening to this through your ear holes,
we will put a link.
Yes, we'll do that. See, this is where we got you on board as a producer, Joe. You are on it. You know how to manage a project. That's something that we've desperately needed for so long. I think anyone who's tried to keep up with our ad hoc release schedule, we'll be very thankful that you are on board. But I have some recommendations, because I have not played that many games with trans, non-binary, or intersex characters in them. But if you are aware of any trans, masc, or intersex characters or themes in games, please let us know, because we could not find that many in the grand scheme of things, and that is shocking. So if you get back to us on the Twitter or the website, we will definitely come back to this in a future episode and do something about this. But I have actually played a couple, and the first one I would like to say is go out and buy 2064 read-only memories, which is available on pretty much every console ever at this point, even phones. It's like a cyberpunk future thing about transhumanism.
Nice. I am sold already.
Every second character is some kind of, trans or non-binary or something. Like, there's probably intersex characters in there that just I never got around to meeting in the game when I played through it, because it's quite big, even though it is a 2D thing. Apparently, it's based very heavily and inspired by a game called Snatcher, which was made by the Metal Gear Solid guy in, the 90s. But I never played it because it was, on the Mega CD, which no one bought. You, go around as, something between, an adventure game where you have to solve puzzles, and also it's got some action things in there a little bit as well. It's just really cool. And there's a robot in it that's your friend, who is essentially non-binary, and voiced by the woman who voices Clementine in the Walking Dead games. It's pretty great. And you also meet lots of fairies as well, so our fairy listeners, there's also a lot of room for you. There's people who have got, tails and stuff. They have, surgeries to do ears, cat ears and stuff.
Do they still keep their regular human ears?
I didn't ask any of the characters in the game, Joe. It didn't feel like an appropriate thing to ask. I didn't want to be problematic in this universe where I didn't understand the rules, so I was trying to be as respectful as possible in my playthrough.
So are you a cat all the time, or just for... Cool, yeah.
There's one character who's a hacker who is sort of non-binary with, I think, fox elements. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I played it.
Perfect.
But yeah, they go down all these routes where identity is absolutely... That identity is, this is the person presenting on their terms, and that's that. And I really loved that. In comparison, when I played Dragon Age Inquisition, which I'm giving a soft recommendation, which is available on PC, Xbox One, PS4, and a couple of other places if you're into getting it, they had a character called Krem, who was a trans man. He was very much a he, him, butch man type. His presentation when I first played it in 2014, because I'd only been out for a couple of years, it actually made me cry, because I genuinely felt seen. Even though I'm a trans woman, I'm not a trans man. It was just one of my favourite video game developers has someone like me in it! I feel so seen! Oh, it's all going to be fine. There's going to be kids playing this, and trans is just going to be boring to them and nothing, and it's going to be great. Played it a few years later, suddenly that whole Krem thing became so clunky in those years because representation in video games for trans people had advanced in that few years, and suddenly it was just oh, this is a bit boring. This is a bit Trans 101 and a bit heavy-handed. Ugh, okay. Well, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad we had this moment.
The trans themes that I've seen in games, and the LGBT ones a little bit more broadly, the ones that actually get it right are the kind of low-key indie games, the short ones with a different premise. It's the big blockbuster AAA games that when they try and do it, they inevitably fuck it up. I refer you to Mass Effect Andromeda. I loved the Mass Effect series. It's a fantastic series of games. Mass Effect 2 is probably one of my favourite video games of all time. It's just perfectly constructed. So then, lots of us were looking forward to Andromeda, and then it came, full disclosure actually, I have not played Andromeda because I didn't have the thing that I needed to play it with at the time, and then it came out and I heard about the trans character in it, and the incredibly ham-fisted way in which they chose to introduce the fact that character was trans is just wow. You wanted to do something, but you didn't bother thinking about how you might do that. You just fucked it. And as ever with Mass Effect games, they fixed it in an update. So...
See, that's strange to me because, for people who don't know, the Mass Effect series is set, 300 years in the future.
Many years in the future.
Many, 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 many years in the future. It's very much the kind of future where, in Star Trek, when people were complaining that Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, they were like, why would he be bald? Wouldn't they have fixed that at that point? The series creator was like, well, at that point, nobody would care. It wouldn't be an issue. And I was thinking, LGBT people would probably be at that stage. At that point, I'd like to think, in the Mass Effect universe, it would be an afterthought of anything. I'm very surprised to hear that in the Mass Effect universe, being trans at that point, hundreds of years in the future, would still be something that would be oh, so what's your junk like? Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just had a quick Google to be able to keep up with this conversation. apparently BioWare came under fire for Ainley Abrams, the trans woman character, volunteering information about her pre-transition name, and later they released a statement and changes made to better reflect trans experiences. And then the next sentence is, the player will only receive this information after a relationship is established through gameplay. And I'm like, are you telling me this person is still volunteering their pre-transition name? Just you have to be close to them first. Because if so, that's problematic.
Yeah, I don't tell people my dead name. People tend to discover my dead name by accident if they know me long enough and they find like something that has it written on in some way. But it's never something I volunteer.
Yeah, it turns out to be something I volunteer as well. It may or may not sort of come up if there's some old documentation lying around or whatever. So yes, but that's the thing, right? So it's not completely beyond the realms of possibility that there would be some trans people that would volunteer that information, perhaps in the early part of transition or whatever, you do you kind of thing. The fact that they just kind of assumed that that was the way to go with it and put that in a game, that for a game of such high advertising levels and expectation and blah blah blah, it's just clunky as fuck and they should have done better, basically.
It's a great example of why you need people that you can consult who have lived experience of being a particular identity if you're going to portray that identity.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And it's not like the trans community is short on programmers.
Right.
Just saying, any video game producers out there, it's not like we're short of people who have the skills for this. We've got artists coming out of everywhere. We've got digital artists, we've got programmers, we've got, I'm surprised that there hasn't been a trans, non-binary, intersex, entirely video game production house somewhere, because we got the people to do it. They're ready to go.
It's true.
And hey, if you're the person who thinks of setting up that house, you can have that idea for free. We just want to see it happen.
Pretty much, yeah.
And we get free games from you for life.
Yeah. Let's not...
Give me something to review.
I was going to say let's not make demands, but yeah, it kind of depends on it for yourself, doesn't it? Cool. All right.
There was one game I did want to bring up because I'm very interested to hear what you think of this, Joe. Dream Daddy. It is a dating simulator all about gay dads. And
yeah, I played it. It's really good.
It is super good. And you can make your daddy who goes on dates trans just by selecting a binder in the character customization settings and stuff. And you can also, and there's also at least one trans dad in that game that you can date. I can't remember specifically which one it was. I think it was the big...
It's Damien.
Yeah, the big beefy guy, right?
No, the sort of Edwardian Gothic type vampire dude.
Of course.
He's the trans man? I haven't played it in a long time. I should have done a run through before recording
Maybe
this.
someone else is trans as well. I haven't played through every route.
I'm just thinking of all the trans men I know and how that aesthetic suits so many of them perfectly. Excellent.
And it's kind of nice because it's the only example of a trans guy with long hair that I've ever seen in representation. I think because lots of people tend to go, we must default to the most butch.
Yeah, there is a thing where trans men, when they first come out, and they first start hormones, every trans man ever immediately grows the biggest beard they can when they are able to. That is definitely a thing. Usually after a few months, they sort of decide whether to keep it or not, and it goes back to sort of regular levels of beardness in the male population or the mask population. But that's very much a thing. But portraying all trans men as having massive beards and bigger, carrying an axe or whatever guys do in their spare time.
What kind of woman doesn't have an axe? Also, nice axe.
I also would like to say that there's been a lot of bad representation in early video games. There was specifically in the Street Fighter / Final Fight series, the story of Poison, who is a character in the game that you would fight. And in the Japanese release, she was a cisgender woman. But then in the West, in the UK and the USA and Europe, they changed her backstory to make her into, at that time, what was known as a transsexual, to get away from the idea that you are a male character beating up a female character.
Actually, from the reading that I've done, she wasn't cisgender in the Japanese release. She was cisgender in concept art. And then people went, but isn't that problematic? And so they made her into a cross-dressing man for Japan and a transgender woman for Western audiences. There was a discrepancy in whether or not she'd had surgery and stuff based on region.
Wow. Jesus, I didn't know any of this. Fucking hell. And this is just for a beat-em-up.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's like sort of Final Fighter set in the Street Fighter universe. Really flying my nerd flag now. And so she has appeared in Street Fighter games as a playable character since, but they've, as much as I understand, Capcom, the publishers and creators of the games, haven't really come out and clarified this in any way. And there's a similar story going on with Super Mario Bros. 2. The USA European release, because in Japan they released this whole other thing that was a nightmarishly hard. They figured out that the West would be too hard for the West, so they released this whole other game, which had an end of level boss called Birdo, who, she has become a bit of a trans icon in recent years. But in the manual, it was originally stated that she was a silly thing who thought she was a girl, even though she was a boy. Blah 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 blah. But in the game, if you take her on her terms, her end of level baddie status is on equal footing with the other baddies. So in some ways, she was the best representation of trans women in video games throughout the 80s. If you threw away the instruction manual, which most people did, because
that's honest. I've got to say, Michelle, that is quite a bold claim.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be corrected.
I think you're out on a limb on that one.
Yeah, but yeah, like I guess I'm a bit of a Mario nut, so I've decided to rewrite Birdo's history for my own sake. To be like, she is an adequate trans woman who is dedicated to being on the Bowser side of evil, and I respect her choices.
Apparently, from the wiki, Birdo would rather be referred to as Birdetta. So. Should we be calling her Birdetta?
All right.
Oh God, did I just dead name Birdo? Birdetta?
Oh yeah.
Jesus, and I'm supposed to be the Nintendo person here. That's my area of expertise, and I've dead named. I'm so ashamed. I'm so sorry, Birdetta. I'm so sorry.
Wonderful.
Did not expect to be dead naming anyone today. You never do you?
It's true.
Look at all that added value of fact seeking.
We needed a producer. So what other games would you recommend, Joe? Because, like, apart from those other games I've mentioned, I have nothing.
So one of the big difficulties here is that a lot of the games that I've played that feature trans or non-binariness are depressing because they're about the struggles of trans and non-binary people.
Yeah.
We don't actually have very many happy stories at all. The big one is, of course, Undertale, which if you play through in pacifist route, you have a nice happy time as a pacifist non-binary kid. And it's great. Ace in Space, apart from the fact that you're dying of cancer, is pretty cheerful. I realise that's kind of a strange way of looking at it, but, nothing is sad on the gender front. There's To Be a Herp Witch, which is like a riff on Pokemon's Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl thing, which is a little indie game from itch.io, and generic non-binary game on itch.io, which is, I like it. I'm an assigned female at birth non-binary person, and it's a little visual novel type thing where you play through a very short date with a woman who refuses to acknowledge that you are not a woman. And it's frustrating, but very well written and true to life. And it made me feel very seen, which was lovely, but it was also deeply frustrating. There's One Night Hot Springs, which is a little visual novel in which you can decide to what extent you want to talk to people about the fact that you're trans while you're at a hot spring for a friend's party. And the joy of that one, mild spoilers, is that people are way more accepting than you think that they're going to be. And so the more open you are about it, generally the more positive a time you'll have, which, especially because the character has a lot of anxiety around it. Oh no, what are people going to think? They're going to judge me. It was lovely to see that being subverted.
Yeah, that's very true to life, because when I was coming out and stuff, I was thinking of the worst case scenario where 100% of all people everywhere will reject me forever. And that wasn't true. People did. That's very real. But I found in my experience, my anxieties were a lot worse than the actual reality, even though the actual reality at points was still really fucking bad. So I could see the logic behind it. But I get the impression, Ashleigh, that...
Just going to say the flip side of that is that, you might be a younger person or, you know, a not out person, rather, playing through that, and the general message that you're getting from the game is, oh, well, if you're open and honest about it, actually people are better than you think. And for a lot of us, that is true, but there's also going to be, you know, I'm not saying that, oh, you know, it's going to encourage people in unsafe situations to come out or whatever, but I don't know. I feel like if that's the takeaway message from it, they possibly could have made it a little more nuanced, but that sounds like a really minor gripe given what the game is and the fact that it even exists.
Honestly, I was kind of summarising a bit. There's a lot of unwitting microaggressions.
I see.
So, like, your best friend has another friend who she's brought along to the party, and you can have a conversation with her where she's like, so you're trans? And you kind of have to do the trans 101 conversation with her. And, you know, she is well-meaning but very ignorant, and it's frustrating, but it isn't malicious, which I think does a nice job of being like, coming out to people isn't always going to be super easy and positive, but sometimes there's that grey area where, like, they don't mean to be crap about it, and if you work with them on it, then they will be better educated for next time. And there's also bits where they talk about the law in Japan regarding transgender women and how you have to be sterilised in order to go through gender affirmation surgery.
Well, you can't have us breeding, Joe.
Exactly.
We'll spread it everywhere.
Most of Europe has some kind of clause such as that, and, you know, so that's... cis people never seem to quite appreciate that is the case, whereas I know myself, and I think you, Michelle, and various other people have kind of accepted it long ago and was like, oh yeah, no, I have to get sterilised, and they're just like, oh my god, that's barbaric, and I'm like, is it? I hadn't really thought about it like that, but sure, yeah, cool. I
mean, for me personally, I decided that I didn't want to quote unquote ever father a kid. I wanted, if I couldn't do it the way I would have really liked to, which is, you know, the whole ride pregnancy style thing, I don't really want to do it. I'd rather adopt. So it wasn't really... So I came into that kind of angle just like, oh, that's a thing. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know we could.
Also, footnote, I follow a lot of adoptees on Twitter who talk about their experiences. Adoption is a problematic industry sometimes, and fostering may be a better and more sustainable option.
That's good to know.
If you have questions about this, legit, my mum and dad are foster carers. That's their job, and they fostered several times when I was a kid as well, so there were other young people around the house.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it is. And so that was kind of always the route that I thought I would go down, and particularly since I've come out as trans and whatever, you know. I was like, oh, have you had some, you know, had your gametes saved? No. Why? I don't need to. And there's other youngsters that I have not contributed genetic material to who may be in need of assistance as well.
So that's a whole bunch of games that I know I want to go out and buy and play in the various forms, and you listeners should too as well, because a game featuring trans, non-binary and intersex characters, admittedly far less intersex characters than we would like. Basically, whenever somebody tries and does that, there's always a backlash from the gaming community, because the gaming community, as wonderful as it can be at times, can also be very toxic. I take you back to Gamergate, where for 2 years, gamers started a whole campaign because women made games sometimes. That's literally what it was.
Yeah, I know.
Very strange time. But yeah, I mean, to the point where there was a game called Baldur's Gate that came out when I was a kid. A company called Beamdog released a DLC for this old game, and they had a trans woman in it that the character could speak to for about 2 minutes, and that started a hate campaign that included death threats to the producers. So obviously, all the people that we have mentioned who have made these games need your support financially or actually. So go down to the links in the description and follow them, like them, and if you have the cash, buy one of these games that we have mentioned.
A bunch of the ones that I mentioned are pay what you want.
That is amazing. The community looking after their own.
Awesome. Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much, Joe, for joining us and having this lovely chin wag. So, as a Steam Curator, you've got some content about kind of equality and inclusion and representation in games. Where can people find that?
So, it's on Steam if you search through Curators and type in inclusive games. And then switch tab, because Steam's search function is terrible, and the first one it comes up with will not actually show it. But also,
Good work,
I'm
Steam.
going to put a link in the episode description
Fantastic.
to make it a lot easier to navigate to.
That sounds like a brilliant idea. So yes, link in the description for more on this sort of thing.
Follow Joe, buy games, do crime.
But ideally not game piracy?
Yeah, because, people got to earn money.
If you're going to pirate anyone, pirate stuff made by Electronic Arts. Because they're bad. They're a bad company if you don't know who they are. They're one of the worst companies in the world. They actually won, worst company in the world 2 years in a row, officially. And in that category, there was, pharmaceutical companies. Pirate EA games.
Arr.
All right, well, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, so is there anywhere else that people can find you online?
I'm on Twitter at EditTheEpic. If you want to follow me, I mostly signal-based cool queer stuff and inclusion things to do with publishing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Go give Joe a follow, and also send Joe all the love for coming in and helping us organise things so we actually get episodes out on time that are polished and nice. That'll be a nice change of pace. And if you like the show, you should check us out on social media. That thing you do every day that ruins your day. Maybe you should stop doing it, but maybe you shouldn't just because you get to follow us, and we're pretty great. You can get us on Facebook /WhatTheTrans. You can get us on Twitter @WhatTheTrans. You can get us on Instagram, which we are now going to start using because I've actually learned how Instagram works now. You can get us on Instagram.com /WhatTheTrans, or you search for What the Trans on the app and you will find us there. You should also check out our website, whatthetrans.com, which will have all the information from the news and from the meet, so you can go on there and see what the hell we were talking about.
Which, with some episodes, it's absolutely a useful thing to have. It's like, oh, okay. Think of it as like the episode's Cliff's Notes. And in addition to us being all over social media like some kind of many-tentacled creature, we also have a Patreon, because of course we do. However, we are aware that it is a difficult time for a lot of people financially at the moment. Now, if you like what we do, obviously, we would really appreciate any support that you can give, whether that's becoming one of our patrons for as little as $1 a month, which is actually roughly works out as 80p. I know I'm trying to give you the sales pitch here, but it is it's pretty good, and we would appreciate it. If finance is an issue, as it so often is, you could perhaps spread the word about the show, or leave us a nice review on social media, or you could even follow us on the social medias, as we've just said. And for the completionists out there, you could even do all of the above, and in which case you will get an achievement, which we will decide the details of later. But there's a bunch of really kind, lovely people who are already patrons of ours, and so to those people we'd just like to say thank you. And those people are Alexandra Lilly,
Anthony Pena,
April Heller,
Becky Scott Fairley,
Bernard's Pink Jellybean,
Cassius Adair,
Chocolate Eclair,
Chris Hubley,
Derek Victor,
Elliot McVeigh,
Emma Doyle,
Ian Coomber,
Karakan 12,
Catherine,
Laker,
Lauren O'Neans,
Lanus,
Maddie Bell,
Matt Reynolds,
Melissa Brooks,
Mike Dickinson,
Mina,
Molly,
Sarah Aquatics,
and Sophie Lewis. Thank you one and all. And that is the end of the show.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye!
This episode of What the Trans was written, produced and hosted by Michelle O'Toole and Ashleigh Talbot, produced by Joe Ross-Barrett. The news was edited by Michelle O'Toole, and the meet was edited by Ben Swithin at Ben Swithin on Twitter, Matt Reynolds at Chai Tiefling on Twitter, and Sierra at Sierra_Golf19 on Twitter. Thanks for listening.